Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout of the Living Income Guaranteed and Equal Life Foundation. Today we are going to be discussing Sudbury Schools, the future of education. And it is a question mark because we will be, in fact, diving into the realm of this particular schooling model that throughout our various in discussions and interviews with our guests today in this series of Hangouts, we've talked about many things that need to be changed in the education system in order to create a social change. And precisely, she has found that this particular education system contains very essential elements that she considers are pertinent to discuss in order to understand democratic change in our society and how to really impulse that potential of our children and our future society, of course. And we are very much looking forward to discuss this discussion with Anna Brix Thomsen, educational sociologist. Welcome, Anna, to the Hangout.
Hi, Marlene. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here, back again.
She's from Denmark, but living in Sweden. And first of all, I'd like to place a disclaimer to this discussion. This is entirely a sociological perspective based on Anna's own research and investigation. All the views presented in this Hangout represent Anna's, myself, and the Equal Life Foundation's very own, and are not the official Sudbury School perspectives. It is all going to be based on the literature, information, and direct contact and experience of Anna having visited a Sudbury school in Denmark. So, having said that, I'd like to remind you, the viewer, that there will be questions and comments that you can place throughout the Hangout. We received already some, so thank you for that.
Oh, cool.
So let's start with our discussion, Anna.
Yeah.
First of all, as myself, I wasn't aware of this model at all. So can you just tell us some of the basics of what the Sudbury model is?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So the Sudbury School has its name, or has gotten its name, from the place where the first original school is located, which is a place called Sudbury Valley in Massachusetts in the United States. And it's a beautiful building. If you haven't, I definitely suggest after this Hangout to go and research Sudbury Schools. But there you can also see the original building. The school still exists and is still running today. And it's a beautiful and fantastic environment. And when you see the building, you wouldn't be able to see that it's a school, which I find that in itself is very interesting. It's like giving children the most beautiful environment possible with, I think there's a creek behind the school, and there are these amazing green lawns, and I think it's kind of a Victorian style maybe. And the school was created in 1968 by a man called Daniel Greenberg, together with a group of, I believe it was a group of parents who wanted alternatives for their children. And Daniel Greenberg has written a book that I definitely recommend reading for those who are more interested in the Sudbury school principle. But today there are actually Sudbury schools all over the world. Of course, there's a lot in the United States, and these schools are sort of independently. It's not the Sudbury model. It's not a franchise. It is more, for example, groups of parents or groups of teachers or people interested in this type of education who have come together to create a school environment inspired by Sudbury. So these schools may be run more or less according to the Sudbury principles or the Sudbury Valley principles that are at the original school. But there is this organization between all of the schools if they do choose to call themselves a Sudbury school. And the principles that the school is based on, and this is also why we're talking about it today, because it's actually very different from normal schools that we know, both private schools and public schools. And we can just maybe list a few of the differences. The main difference is that in the Sudbury School, you have children coming from the age of 4 to the age of 19. and there are no classes, so the children are not age segregated. All the children are able to use the entire facility of the school and can intermingle and be educated and educate themselves together with children of all ages, which is very unique and not something that you see in many other school environments or school models. They do, for example, have it in the Freinet school principle or philosophy as well. And then the Sudbury model has the Sudbury School has three main principles that is at the core of the school's, the heart of the school. And it has to do with educational freedom, and it has to do with democratic governance, and it has to do with personal responsibility. So these three principles are at the heart of all decisions and all activities that are at the school. And then the third thing that is very unique about the Sudbury Schools is that, and this is of course the democratic governance element, which is that the school is run by something called a school meeting, and that or you could call it, you know, if we were to translate it in terms that we kind of understand, is that it's kind of like a government or a board. So the school meeting consists of all teachers and all students. So they are, both teachers and students are considered equal members of the school. So it's not just the students that are members of the school, or just the teachers or the principal or the parents. It is everyone who has their life, their daily life. They are members of the school meeting. And this is then meetings that are kept every week. I don't know, maybe some Sudbury schools don't have it every week, but as you mentioned in the beginning, I visited a Sudbury school in Denmark, and they had the school meeting every week. And the school meeting is sort of the legislative body of the school. And so this is where budgets are decided, where, for example, money will go, you know, the money that the school not produces, but the budget that the school has. So you can, for example, apply for money for a field trip. And teachers have to do this on an equal basis with students. And then you will have both students and teachers involved in leading this school meeting. And this can be young children and old children, or older children. And then from the school meeting, they have these, I don't know what it's called in English, but let's call it agencies. I'm sure that there's a proper word for it. I just don't remember it right now. Or you can call it boards. So, for example, they might have a music board or a music agency. So they have these different groups, subgroups, that then, or interest organizations, we could also call them. So, for example, there can be a music interest organization, and that will then consist of all the people who are really interested in music and who really wants music to be part of the school. And so they will then have their own meetings where they will discuss purchase of music instruments or field trips to concerts or making concerts. And then that board or that organization can then apply to the school meeting for funds to fund their work or the things that they do. And at the school that I visited in Denmark, you could actually go into the office, and then you have all the folders for all the groups. And I could, as a, you know, I just walked in from the outside, I was allowed to, as a visitor, open this folder, and I could actually see the budget of the music board or the communication board. So there's a complete level of transparency where everyone has the ability to be involved in everything that's going on, from the youngest child to the teachers and everyone that is a part of the school. And then the second thing that they have in relation to this is the JC, which is the Judiciary Board. And that's like a type of an organization that exists parallel with the school meeting. The school meeting is like the ultimate organ that makes the final decisions, but they have this system which is like their own court system, their own law system. So the school has a book of laws, and there are a lot of laws. I think there were over 300 in the one that I saw in Denmark. And it can be anything. It can be, for example, you're not allowed to bring snow into the school inside. If you play with snow, it has to be outside. And then if a student is seen or caught throwing snow inside, despite the rule being that you're not allowed to do that, they can be brought up. Another student or a teacher can call them into this JC, and then they go through a sort of procedural hearing where you have a board of students and teachers that will then listen and ask, why did you throw snow inside the school? And you're then able to reply. And you can also, if I recall correctly, you can have like a support with you as well. And then they will even call in witnesses. So Marlene, did you see that Anna threw the snow inside? And did you see, why? Do you know why she did that? And then they will give the person, if they see that is appropriate, they will give that person a consequence. And the consequences will often be made very commonsensical and practical to match the crime, so to speak. So it could, for example, be, okay, now we've caught you throwing snow inside 5 times. This has to stop. So for the next 2 weeks, you are on snow shoveling duty. Every afternoon, you have to shovel snow for an hour. And then the idea is that you will learn, the direct consequences of your actions, that you will be able to see how actions you take have consequences that might not be supportive for you or for others. So I think, and then of course the fourth and the final thing that makes Sudbury very unique is the fact that there are no classes. There are no mandatory classes. There are no so when you look at the school, there are films and videos about the school, and when you walk into the area, it looks like you have children just walking randomly around and sitting and playing and reading books, and it can probably look quite disorganized. But that's due to the principle of education regarding personal freedom and responsibility that the Sudbury schools believe in. So I think that gives a pretty good overview.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the first thing that comes to mind is that many people might be going like, what? There is no authority.
Yeah.
How does that work? We have this principle of freedom. It's something that we generally look for. Yet, if we look at how our education system works, many people have equated schools to being prisons, for example. It's something like that freedom is yearned, whereas from what I'm understanding on what you shared, in a Sudbury system, it is precisely something that is given. So how is this point of freedom lived and applied, and if there is any limit to it?
As far as I know, there are no limits. The limits would be the rules of the school, which in its most basic form, there's an essence that has to do with respecting others and respecting yourself and taking care of the environment and being supportive to others and treating others as you would want to be treated. And then of course I would also assume that there's a limit in terms of if you go and injure yourself or injure others. But a really cool example about how far this freedom extends is from I saw one of the films. The Sudbury Valley School has a YouTube channel, and they have a lot of really interesting videos there. And one of them, there's a young man, or I think it's actually his mother, that explains how he spent 3 years fishing. So when he was, or maybe it was himself that explained it, I don't remember, but I remember the fact that he spent 3 years fishing. So like from when he was 13 to when he was 16, that would be all he would do. He would get a fishing pole, and then he would go to the lake, and then he would fish. And I think that's something that, just something like that, can seem extremely provocative for people who are used to the normal school system that we all know. Because how can that be education? How can that, you start thinking, oh, what about math, and what about reading, and what about, and the way that he explains it is so beautiful, because he can see his own process, and the type of person that he was, and how that was what was most supportive for him during those years, and how he learned so much through it. Like, he became a master fisherman because that was his passion in those moments and in those days, and learning how to be alone, and learning how to be in nature, and reflecting on nature. And there's so much in it, but you have to be able to, at least for a moment, at least play with the idea of accepting the premise that schooling as we know it might not be the only form of education a child can go through and become a full, complete, whole human being that has all the resources and abilities that we think they should have.
Yes, this concept that we have of what we call the traditional school system that we are all and have been part of for the most part. I know that you had a different schooling perspective and education when you were growing up. But there is some people that are aware of other alternative methods. There was a question whether what are the differences with the free democratic school? And this is also considering that what democracy implies in a school system.
Yeah, I'm not so intimately familiar with free democratic schools in other countries, or I think it's a very broad term, and I know that there are a lot of schools that call themselves free democratic schools. But first of all, I think the age segregation is very common even in alternative schools, and the classes, you'll still have classes, and then you won't have the extreme level of democracy and democratic participation that they do have in Sudbury schools. So I think that from what I know and from what I have investigated, Sudbury is definitely one of the most progressive forms of democratic education there is, where other schools may be more or less where they have elements of democratic participation. For example, I went to a Frenay school as a child, which also incorporates a lot of the same principles, but there, the school wasn't founded around a school meeting that like we didn't own the school, all of us together. You didn't have teachers and students at an equal level, for example. So I think Sudbury is very unique in that regard.
That's absolutely revolutionary. I mean, the very fact that we create this stance in school of really despising it, not enjoying it, is precisely because we have this authority upon us that we have to follow, or else we will be punished or have bad grades, etc., or expelled from the school ultimately. And this very notion of having that authority, of course, also doesn't allow us to develop that self-responsibility that you mentioned is part of how it is developed in these systems of the Sudbury model. So let's call it, a situation where a person decides to spend most of their time playing video games. I am aware that they can do this in school. What's your perspective on this? Because this is, when I heard this, I was like, no, it can't be. How can a child spend most of their time playing video games in school? How does that work? And what's your take on this?
I just wanted to quickly mention to what you said before that actually it is like this in Sudbury schools, or at least in Sudbury Valley that I know of, that teachers are only hired for one term at a time. So teachers only have their contracts for 1 year. And when that year is up, all the teachers are being evaluated by the students. And if the students are not satisfied with the teachers, they risk actually getting fired. So it's actually kind of the other way around, that the teachers have to be on their toes, and the teachers have to make sure to be their best and to provide the best support possible, because they don't have a secure position where they just have their job no matter what, no matter how they treat the children. They're just allowed to do whatever they want because they're the authority. In fact, in that regard, the children have more authority because it's their school. They're the ones that are the recipients of the teacher's education. So of course they should have a say. But yeah.
Before you continue, if we translate that to how our society operates, and if we were able to, in the same way, unite and qualify or assess how well our public representatives are doing and have that say of, you're in this position for 1 year, we will assess you. If you're good, then you stay. That's how our society should work.
Yes.
That's why we find so vital to discuss this as a platform in an education system, because then children will become so used to having a say, whereas in society, no one has it right now.
And there's absolutely no reason, there's no logical reason that children shouldn't be a part of, for example, deciding what their school should be and how it should be. They're perfectly capable of contributing and participating. And it has a lot to do with the stigmas that we place on children. I recently wrote a blog about giving children the right to vote. So maybe we can link to that in the description. And if you want to know more about it, you can read there. But let's get back to, what was it you asked me before?
The point about video games and how it is possible to play video games in school. And I ask because this is commonly like an activity that is translated as the diversion, sometimes even the reward after the kid has gone to school, made their homework, then you can play video games. So now it's like backwards. Tell us your perspective on it.
Yeah, I do see that it's quite a complex topic. And I've actually walked quite a process with myself because I wasn't sure where I stood. I was kind of in between chairs because on one hand, I completely support a child that wants to play computer games. I completely respect the fact that this is their passion and I might not understand it. And I think a big deal of it is that when our child or our children develop interests that we don't have or that we don't understand, we just automatically dismiss it instead of respecting their choice and what they find interesting and fascinating in the world. So that's one part. And then the other part is that research has shown that it actually is not, we have this idea of computer games being very damaging and that it slows down the brain and it makes you violent. But a lot of research is actually showing that it's not like that at all. And especially the video games or the computer games that are there now, games like Minecraft, for example, and a lot of newer games are very cooperative. So kids often sit and play with kids from all over the world, and they speak and they communicate. And I know over here in Sweden, where I've worked with children, and also on their computer games, I know that they often actually learn English very quickly because they have to be able to read what it says on the game or what the character speaks. And so it actually becomes an educational tool in many ways. So, and then the other side is that I also know of children where it has not been supportive. But what is so interesting is that in most cases, this could also be children. We have to remember that not all children in the Sudbury School has been raised in that environment. So if you've gone to public school and you've learned that computer games is something that you only get to do when it's a very scarce resource in a way, this thing that is your greatest passion at the moment, at the time of your life. So obviously when you then go to the Sudbury School and you're just allowed to play whenever you want to, that could explain one of the reasons. And then I think it's also generational. I think it's a very just like we had other things when we were growing up that all the kids got obsessed about. I think that it's a very big part of growing up and being a child now. But then, of course, you also have, and I would assume that you can have that at Sudbury as well, a child that uses computer games as an escape, or where it, for whatever reason, does have an adverse effect. And then what is really cool is that in a Sudbury environment, you would be able to provide alternatives. You would be able to speak with the child about it. You would be able to try different games. You would be able to sit down and play with them. You could as an adult sit down and look and find out what's going on, and see what's so fascinating about it. But that is something that is not being done by a lot of parents or teachers otherwise. We just dismiss it and tell them to get off or limit the time that they're allowed to be on the computer, instead of investigating what it's actually about, in which we could also find out, well, is this actually this child's passion? Or is there something else going on that's causing them to use computer game as an escape? Just like everyone, all people can use all kinds of things as escapes. It's so I wouldn't vilify computer games. I think it's more complex than that, and I think that they're not in itself damaging. And I know there are some really inspiring stories about children that have spent their entire childhood playing computer games in unschooling or Sudbury environments, and who, for example, go on to go into MIT at the age of 15 because they have already gone through a specialization of perfecting their skills. We have to remember that when you're playing computer games, it's not like you're doing nothing. There are a lot of motoric skills and communication skills and navigation skills that you're developing. So it's certainly not like it doesn't have any value, but it may be a value that can be difficult for adults to understand and see if they don't even engage and discover what's involved in it.
So you're mentioning adults, and we had a comment previous to this Hangout from Mats Haglund from Sweden, actually, and he's saying, I also think the Sudbury model is good, but it's hard for adults to stop thinking that they are the ones who decide, and that the main role of children is to accept that and obey. So what are some of the ideas or perceptions that parents would have in order to object this system that enables these kind of freedoms and everything that we've been discussing? So from your perspective, what motivates those fears and, let's call it, resistances?
Yeah, I mean, that would be what we just talked about, that I think that would be the first fear that would come up. If you are a parent that's used to the traditional education system and you also believe in it and believe that it actually provides your child with, prepares your child adequately to become a functional and successful member of society. Because we have to remember that that's the foundation when you, as a parent, would say, what is this kind of education? You can't do that. It's because you already believe in a different type of system, right? And so the objections that come up is that, what will my child learn? How will my child learn math and reading and writing if they can just do whatever they want all day? If they're just allowed to play computer games and there is no control? If I put myself in the shoes of a parent that sees schools and society this way, I would be really scared that it would just be like chaos. And that my child wouldn't learn social norms and they wouldn't be socialized properly. But what is really interesting is that, based on what I've seen, Sudbury Valley actually has the exact opposite effect. When I visited the Sudbury Valley School in Denmark, one of the most striking things that when we came in was that the children will look you straight in the eye and be completely relaxed and comfortable with speaking with you on equal terms, and will explain their ideas, will share who they are completely openly and eloquently, because they've been brought up and they're being educated in a system that respects them and that respects their voices and their individuality, and they learn that their integrity is not something that adults have a right to violate. And so I would say that in many ways, Sudbury actually provides children with something that the current education system hasn't been able to, which is personal integrity, or at least the ability to develop it, the space to develop it. Yeah.
I can only imagine how all of what you just explained could translate once again into creating these very participative, confident, straightforward, integral beings into society. If we look at, this notion that we see too much as out there in terms of changing the world, what we really have to look at is precisely how we prepare our children, who will be the future of this world, to precisely learn how to embody these principles, because the current education system, look at the world, that's the result. So obviously continuing that way will only lead us to destruction, actual chaos, and actual incompetence, and the rest of it that we're witnessing now.
Yeah.
So that's why we find it so important to discuss these kind of models, because that is a way in which we can prepare people to actually get to develop themselves to their utmost potential, as I understand it. And also, here we're looking at the role of the parents. Sometimes parents have this idea that the school will save them, or, I have nothing to do, let it all for the teachers and schools. So what would you say to a parent that might have resistance to everything that you've mentioned of the Sudbury School, yet at the same time believe that they have no say in it, in the education of their children? What's your take on that?
Yeah, this is really a big shame, and it's quite tragic, really, and it's showing the level of apathy that exists in our societies. And what is really interesting is that that this perspective, this empowerment that we often experience as parents and as people in general, it actually comes from our own schooling. It's a product of our own schooling. If you see a child that's 5, 6 years old, just before, when they switch from kindergarten to school, I have not met a child that's not yearning to go to school. They look so much forward to it. They can't wait to learn more and be exposed to more. And then that flame or that light, it just slowly dies, and it dies, and it dies, and it dies. And then you have this adult that just, that don't have a voice, that don't have that personal integrity, that don't believe that they, there's this idea that they have a right over their children, but it's more like the child is an object, rather than an individual sovereign being that the parent has an utmost responsibility for supporting. So that it becomes very much that it's kind of like that society is the parent, and we, we're the ones that get to dress the children, or we're the ones that, it's very skewed in a way, where we've become so used to that, the doctor always knows better, the teacher always knows better, everyone else always knows better, and we don't believe in our own power or in our own integrity. And so all of that comes from our own schooling in one way or another, whether we remember it and experience it directly, or whether it's something that just automatically was integrated into us when we were told to sit down and shut up and take what you're getting.
So that's why also then the parents that might react to this kind of information, they might not remember that it's also part of indoctrination that the very school system has placed in, like a nice lockdown. So what would you directly say to parents that are watching this suddenly and kind of considering it yet fearing some aspects?
Well, I wouldn't even look at Sudbury education as an option for my child if I couldn't completely commit to it, because I think it is so extreme that you would walk around as a parent with tremendous fear if you didn't actually understand the purpose and agreed with the purpose, which is the same with unschooling as well. So I would say slow down, and then begin this process of deschooling yourself. And by deschooling, I mean investigate and remember and get to understand how your years of schooling has come to shape the way you see the world, and to question all of those beliefs that you take for granted as that's just the way that it is. That's just the way that it has to be. Of course, we have to work to survive. And like adults would tell me when I was a child, they would always say, if everyone did like you did, we wouldn't have, no one would be in society, you know? So, yeah, that's what I would do, you know, that you can, if what we're talking about here somehow resonates with you, it's not like you have to then go out and do something that you feel would violate you, but you can start a process within yourself of investigating what of all the beliefs that you have and the principles you believe in are actually just a result of what you were told as a child, and what you learned during your school years just by being in that environment, which is not a supportive environment in most cases. Some of us have been fortunate to have nice school experiences, but I think most of us have a lot of very traumatic experiences behind us that we don't even remember because it's so normalized. We think that that's just how it has to be. Just this point of having to sit with 30 other children your own age in a classroom day in and day out while your body is developing, and all the body wants to do is just move and explore and write and read, you know, and then you have to go completely against your own nature, and you're told that if you know that for the kids that can't sit still, that there's something wrong with you, that you're being disruptive and you're interrupting the education, and don't you want to learn, you know? Meanwhile, that, you know, it was something completely different going on, because all children want to learn. That's all they do all day. So that's really what I would do, and I'd be happy to support and help, because we are also walking this process for ourselves. It's not something that you do in a span of 5 minutes, because there's a lot of schooling. You know, a lot of us, we've gone to school for over 10 years of our childhood, so there's a lot to go through.
Children are completely underestimated on that, and it's so important to remind ourselves that it's mostly the school system that has suppressed that innate ability, natural learning abilities. So it's definitely important for ourselves as grown-ups to take responsibility for that at a collective level. I mean, I personally live with someone that has had the worst experiences in school through various reasons, even in so-called best system of education in the world, Finland, according to the OECD, isn't it? Yeah. And, you know, when he started investigating about the Sudbury School, he said, I would actually like to go to that school. That's a school that I would have gone to. And to see how much a person that has been affected by a school system to say, this is what I would like to try out, it's quite a significant thing, at least from my own perspective. And I would like to also ask you, Anna, do you want to add something to that?
No.
Okay, so in general, we can see that there are many potentials and cool aspects of this model. Is there anything that you would like to improve, if you could, in relation to what you've discussed?
Well, it's kind of difficult for me to answer, given that I don't have a very in-depth experience with the Sudbury schools. But I'm sure that there are things that can be improved. Yeah, I mean, no doubt. And I would also say that even when we do find models, all various models that we do want to implement, that we see could be solutions, you know, we have to always be open to improving them. We should always improve them. I don't think it's possible to find anything that's perfect, and it would be delusional to think that it is. When I was at the Sudbury School in Denmark, I noticed, you know, that they have a lot of laws, and I was like, how would I remember all of these laws? And some of them might seem not so, you know, for example, at that school, you're not allowed to eat popcorn. And then of course we asked about it, and they actually had a really cool explanation for it, which was that, you know, they had tried not having this rule, but every time someone made popcorn, there was just popcorn everywhere, and no one wanted to clean it up. And then, someone took it up and they created the law. Then someone said, oh, please, can we have popcorn? They rewrote the law. And then after like 5 runs of that, they were like, okay, we're just going to ban popcorn. It's not the end of the world. So, yeah. And I mean, I don't know, there could be probably improvements to that system. And also, like, how do you expect a 4-year-old or 6-year-old to be able to remember all those rules? So that could be another dimension. And then, of course, the fact that for me, as a Danish person living in Sweden, the biggest problem is the fact that we're not even allowed to create Sudbury schools here, which I find is to be tragic, due to the very restrictive rules of the government here. Because I think it would be amazing to have Sudbury schools all over the world, and to keep developing on it, because the world is not what it was in 1968. So there's no reason that, just because it's good, that we can't keep expanding a model, or make it more streamlined with the society that we have now.
You just had your first Hangout, which we are inviting everyone to watch and to follow
Yes.
through in your YouTube channel, called
Yes.
Redefining Education. I
Yes.
thoroughly enjoyed it because, there was this list of many options that, of course, need like to be specified in each Hangout. Very much looking forward to it. But one thing that I definitely, kind of got this idea to as well, in terms of the licensing for parents, or in relation to parents, because as you mentioned, with children being these individuals that are just essentially coming into this world, it's more like the adults that need some extra support. So in terms of improving the Sudbury school system, I would say that if there could be a way of creating a Sudbury school for parents, maybe, or special courses, chats, discussions. I don't know if they take place, but that would be my take. Tell us about your perspective on this, and then also about your Hangouts to invite everyone.
Yes, no, I completely agree. I think, and I actually think that as a parent, it would be amazing to be able to go to a Sudbury school where there are children, and to be able to see the example of other adults who have, for example, successfully de-schooled themselves, so they're able to embrace education in the moment as what is needed for each child, or what is possible. I actually think that would be really cool, rather than going on an evening course at your local community school, and then get this like theoretical blah 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 children seminar on children. Rah, rah, rah. I really think that it would be cool for parents to get their hands on, so to speak, to see also in practice how living with children and interacting with children can be completely different. And I definitely see this as something that has to happen in the future, that we could create in this world, much more support for parents, because it almost doesn't exist. We just expect people to be able to nurture and foster and bring up a child virtually, without any preparation, without any knowing of what they're doing, and even coming with a lot of negative or dysfunctional patterns in their luggage, or what you say, that you don't even know how to. There are so many people that say, when I have a child, I will never do like my mother did. And then you end up doing it anyway, because you don't know how your own mind works. You don't know how these things exist within you without you having any direction over it. And that's something that we all need to, support each other and walk a process of learning how to change, because that's the only way that we're going to change this world, is by giving our children a different foundation, a solid, supportive foundation to become full human beings with the full span of their potential and capacity that they can possibly develop.
Absolutely. If we want self-governance in this world, and we want the best society that we can create, we need to start in the nucleus of society, which is family, parenting, being the most important job in the world. I won't stop saying that, and schooling for sure. So with these new models, it definitely gives us a refreshing sensation in terms of what the future of education can be if we also make it so, if we participate and become part of it. So thank you very much, Anna, for this discussion and for being part of this process in your own doings and ways, which maybe in the future we can discuss in terms of your projects. But I definitely suggest to anyone watching to watch Anna's Hangout series, interview series, conversations called Redefining Education. We will leave a link to her YouTube channel as well to the first episode. And if you have any other questions, comments, you can place them in the YouTube video, and we will make sure that Anna gets through them. So thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye, everyone.
And thank you very much to you, the viewer. See you next time. Politics of Selfies next week, so keep an eye on that. Until next time, bye-bye.